The porcelain face stared unblinking from the dusty shelf in the antique shop. Its painted lips curved into a fixed, unsettling smile, and its glass eyes, a startling shade of sapphire, seemed to follow Alara as she moved through the cluttered aisles. It wasn't a particularly large doll, barely a foot tall, dressed in a faded lace-trimmed dress that had yellowed with age. Yet there was something about it, an aura of stillness and watchful patience that sent a shiver tracing down Alara's spine. Interesting piece, isn't she? Mr. Abernathy, the shop owner, a man whose own wrinkles seemed to mirror the cracks in the antique furniture surrounding him, materialized beside her. His voice was a dry rustle, like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. Alara, a collector of peculiar and forgotten things, found herself strangely drawn to the doll, despite the unease it evoked. "She is striking," she conceded, her gaze locked on those unnervingly bright eyes. "They call her Lily," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice dropping slightly as if sharing a secret. "Came to me from an estate sale. Belonged to a little girl who, well, let's just say strange things happened around her." Alara's curiosity, a relentless beast that often led her down shadowy paths, was piqued. Strange things? Mr. Abernathy hesitated. His gaze flickered towards the doll, then back to Alara. Whispers. Things moving on their own. A chill in the air where there shouldn't be. The usual sort of nonsense people attribute to old houses and overactive imaginations. He offered a thin, almost apologetic smile. But there was something about this one. Even I felt it. Despite the warning, or perhaps because of it, Alara felt an undeniable pull. The doll wasn't beautiful in a conventional sense, but it possessed a unique, almost magnetic quality. "How much are you asking for her?" A price was agreed upon, a surprisingly modest sum considering the doll's age. As Alara carried Lily out of the dimly lit shop and into the afternoon sun, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just acquiring an object, but something more. Back in her Victorian-era home, filled with her other curious finds, Alara placed Lily on a bookshelf in her study. The doll's sapphire eyes seemed to survey the room, taking in the dusty tomes and forgotten artifacts. For the first few days, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. Alara found herself occasionally glancing at Lily, a fleeting sense of unease quickly dismissed as mere fancy. Then, the whispers began. At first they were so faint, so ephemeral, that Alara questioned her own sanity. A soft rustling, like silk brushing against wood, just at the edge of hearing. Sometimes, when she was alone in the house, she would catch a fleeting scent of lavender, a fragrance she didn't recognize. One evening, as she was reading in her study, a book slid off the shelf beside Lily with a soft thud. Alara jumped, her heart pounding. "Just the old house settling," she muttered to herself, though the air in the room felt strangely still. The incidents grew more frequent, more pronounced. A teacup would inexplicably fall from a table. A door she was certain she had closed would creak open. The whispers became clearer, though still indecipherable, like a child murmuring secrets in a language she didn't understand. Alara, a woman of logic and reason, tried to find rational explanations. Drafts, old wiring, her own fatigue-fueled imagination. But a growing knot of dread tightened in her stomach with each inexplicable event. Her gaze would often drift to Lily, her porcelain face impassive, her sapphire eyes unwavering. One morning she found Lily in a different position on the shelf. Her head, which had been facing forward, was now tilted slightly to the side, as if she were observing Alara. A cold dread washed over her. This was no longer the house settling. Driven by a mixture of fear and a desperate need to understand, Alara began researching the history of antique dolls. She pored over books, scoured online archives, searching for any mention of a doll named Lily, any tales of strange occurrences associated with such objects. She discovered folklore surrounding spirit dolls, objects believed to be inhabited by or connected to supernatural entities. Tales of dolls that moved, that spoke, that brought misfortune to their owners. These stories, once dismissed as fanciful superstitions, now sent a chill down her spine. One particularly disturbing account spoke of a porcelain doll that was said to house the spirit of a child who had died tragically. The doll was said to mimic the child's movements, her whispers, and even her anger if she felt slighted. Ilara found herself increasingly avoiding the study. The doll's presence had permeated the atmosphere of her home, turning it from a sanctuary into a place of growing unease. She would catch glimpses of Lily from the hallway, her fixed smile now seeming malevolent, her sapphire eyes filled with an unnerving intelligence. One night, Ilara was awakened by a distinct sound coming from the study. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like tiny fingers drumming on wood. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowly rose from bed, her hand trembling as she reached for a lamp. The hallway was cold, the air thick with a silence that was more unsettling than any noise. As she approached the study door, the tapping stopped. Hesitantly, she pushed it open. The room was bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Everything was still, undisturbed. Except for Lily. The doll was no longer on the shelf. Ilara's breath hitched in her throat. Her gaze frantically scanned the room, finally settling on the small, lace-clad figure sitting in her reading chair. Its porcelain head was tilted back, its sapphire eyes reflecting the moonlight like twin pools of icy fire. And then, she heard it. A soft, childish giggle, high-pitched and chilling, that seemed to emanate from the doll itself. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through Ilara's rational mind. This was not her imagination. This was real. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The doll remained in the chair, its fixed smile widening, if that were even possible, seeming to mock her fear. Days turned into nights filled with escalating terror. Lily began to move more frequently, appearing in different rooms, always watching Ilara. The whispers intensified, sometimes sounding like a plaintive cry, other times like a hissed threat. Small objects would disappear and reappear in strange places. Ilara would find tiny handprints in the dust on her furniture, prints that were far too small to be her own. Sleep became a luxury Ilara could no longer afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside her window, sent her heart racing. She lived in a constant state of hypervigilance, her eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, expecting to see the doll. She tried to get rid of Lily. She packed her in a box, intending to take her back to Mr. Abernathy's shop. But the next morning, the box was empty, and Lily was sitting on her bed, her sapphire eyes fixed on Ilara as if she knew her intentions. Desperate, Ilara consulted a local historian, hoping to find more information about the doll's previous owner. Mrs. Gable was an elderly woman with a sharp mind and a vast knowledge of the town's history. After listening to Ilara's increasingly frantic account, Mrs. Gable's face grew somber. The estate sale? Was it the Blackwood Manor? Ilara nodded, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Mrs. Gable sighed. The Blackwood family, a tragic story. Their youngest daughter Liliana died young, a terrible accident. They say she was inseparable from her doll, a porcelain one with sapphire eyes. A cold dread washed over Ilara. Liliana. There were rumors, Mrs. Gable continued, her voice low, that the parents in their grief imbued the doll with some keepsake. A lock of her hair, perhaps. Something that tied her spirit to it. The whispers, the movements, the chilling giggle. It all began to make a horrifying sense. Armed with this newfound terrifying knowledge, Ilara returned home, her mind racing. She had to find a way to sever the connection, to release whatever held Liliana's spirit to the doll. That night, the activity reached a fever pitch. Doors slammed shut with violent force. Furniture scraped across the floor. The whispers were no longer indistinct murmurs, but clear, chilling words. Mine. You're mine. Ilara barricaded herself in her study, the only room she felt had any semblance of safety, though Lily was likely lurking somewhere in the house. She clutched a small silver locket, a family heirloom she had always felt offered her some form of protection. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Lily stood in the doorway, her small porcelain figure radiating an aura of malevolent energy. Her sapphire eyes glowed in the dim light, and her painted smile seemed to stretch into a grotesque grin. "You can't leave me," a small, chilling voice echoed from the doll. It was the voice Ilara had heard in the whispers, now clear and filled with a desperate, possessive rage. Terror lent Ilara a surge of adrenaline. She grabbed the heavy brass candlestick from her desk and lunged at the doll. The candlestick connected with Lily's porcelain head with a sickening crack. The doll tumbled to the floor, its sapphire eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. For a moment there was silence. Then a blood-curdling scream, the sound of a child in unimaginable agony, filled the room. The air grew icy cold, and a dark, swirling mist began to coalesce above the broken doll. Ilara stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. The mist writhed and contorted, taking on a vaguely human form, its features blurred and indistinct, but the raw anguish emanating from it was palpable. The spectral figure lunged at Ilara, its touch like ice fire. Ilara cried out, raising the silver locket in defense. As the mist came into contact with the silver, it recoiled with a shriek, a sound that tore at Ilara's very soul. Remembering Mrs. Gable's words, Ilara realized the key might lie in severing the physical connection between the spirit and the doll. She had to destroy the vessel. With trembling hands, she grabbed a heavy bookend and brought it down on the broken porcelain head again and again. The doll shattered into pieces, the sapphire eyes scattering like fallen stars. With each strike, the spectral figure shrieked, its form flickering and dissipating. As the last shard of porcelain broke, the mist dissolved completely, leaving behind an eerie silence and a lingering sense of cold. Ilara stood amidst the wreckage, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The terror was still raw, but a sense of finality had settled over the house. The whispers were gone. The cold was receding. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in her study, surrounded by the broken remains of Lily, the silver locket clutched tightly in her hand. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the window, a sense of peace, fragile but real, began to settle over her. The next morning, Ilara carefully collected the broken pieces of the doll. She buried them deep in her garden, under the roots of an ancient oak tree, hoping to keep Liliana's restless spirit at peace. The house never fully lost its chill, and Ilara would occasionally catch the faint scent of lavender on a still night. But the whispers were gone. The movement ceased. Lily was finally silent. Ilara never collected antique dolls again. The memory of those sapphire eyes, the chilling giggle, the possessive whispers, remained etched in her mind, a terrifying reminder of the night she brought something more than just an object into her home. She had brought a tormented spirit, trapped within porcelain, and the terror it unleashed would forever haunt the quiet corners of her Victorian house. The doll was gone, but the fear lingered, a cold shadow in the warmth of her home, a silent testament to the night Lily came alive. The package arrived on a Thursday afternoon, wrapped in brown paper and bound with thick twine. There was no return address, only Emily Taylor's name scrawled in spidery handwriting. She assumed it was from her grandmother, who had recently passed away, leaving Emily the entirety of her Victorian estate just outside Portland. When she unwrapped the package, her heart skipped a beat. Nestled inside a velvet-lined wooden box was a porcelain doll, about 18 inches tall. It wore a faded lace dress, its hands delicately carved, its glass eyes unnervingly lifelike. One eye was slightly cracked, giving it a perpetual squint. There was a note tucked inside. She must never be left alone in the dark. Light keeps her asleep. Emily laughed nervously. Weird joke, Grandma. She placed the doll on a shelf in her bedroom, surrounded by natural light that streamed through tall windows. She never liked dolls, but something compelled her to keep it. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was guilt. Either way, the doll stayed. That night, the power went out. 2. The whispering begins. At first, Emily thought it was the wind, whispers weaving through the old pipes, a house's memory murmuring in the dark. But then she heard it clearly. "Emily." She sat upright in bed. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. The whisper had been close, inside the room. She reached for her phone to use the flashlight. When the beam landed on the doll, she froze. The doll was no longer on the shelf. It sat on her dresser now, legs dangling, its head turned toward the bed, staring with its single, cracked eye. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat constricted and her limbs felt like they weighed 100 pounds. Slowly, she reached for the doll and returned it to the shelf. Maybe she'd moved it earlier and forgotten. Maybe she was sleepwalking. The power returned a few minutes later, but the whispering didn't stop. 3, deeper into the dark. Over the next week, the doll appeared in different places every morning, on the living room couch, at the foot of her bed, even once inside the refrigerator. Emily started recording herself at night. The footage was always corrupted, cut short by static, or inexplicably erased. On the 8th night, she awoke to find her bedroom door open. She always closed it. Always. The doll was now sitting on her pillow, its mouth open just a fraction wider than before. And this time, its hands were stained with something dark, red-brown, dried and crusted at the fingertips. Emily screamed. She locked the doll in the attic, but every night she heard footsteps above her head, slow, deliberate footsteps pacing in the attic, stopping above her bed, as if the doll was standing directly above her. Then came the scratching. 4. The history desperate, Emily began researching the house and her grandmother's past. What she found chilled her to the bone. In 1897, a young girl named Annabelle Moray lived in that same house. She was the only daughter of a reclusive dollmaker named Elias Moray. Annabelle died tragically in her bedroom at age 9, mysteriously found with her mouth sewn shut and her eyes wide open. Rumors claimed Elias had tried to capture her spirit inside a doll, a forbidden ritual known in obscure occult circles. Villagers spoke of screams from the attic, and eventually Elias vanished without a trace. The house changed hands many times, but each owner died under strange circumstances, burned, drowned, vanished, insane. Emily's grandmother had sealed off most of the rooms in the house. Now she understood why. She found her grandmother's journal. The final entry read, "I can't destroy her. I tried fire, hammers, even salt and prayers. She always comes back. I buried her once. She clawed her way out. I've sealed the attic. As long as she stays in the dark, she sleeps. God help the next soul who lets the light go out." 5. The shadows move. Emily tried to leave the house. Her car wouldn't start. The doors wouldn't open. Her phone stopped working. It was as if the house was sealing itself shut, trapping her. That night, she awoke to find every candle in the house lit, and the doll sitting in the middle of a salt circle in the living room, its head slowly turning toward her, even as she stared. The lights flickered. The doll stood up. Emily ran. She locked herself in the bathroom and screamed until her voice was hoarse. The scratching started again, on the other side of the door. Then the whispering, louder now. "Emily, you're mine." She sobbed as the light bulb above her sputtered. Then, silence. The bulb went out. 6. Possession. When she opened her eyes, it was morning. She was still in the bathroom. The door was ajar. She emerged cautiously. Everything seemed normal except for one thing. The doll was gone. She felt a sick twist in her gut. It was worse now. Much worse. Over the next few days, Emily began to lose time. Hours vanished from her memory. She'd find her hands stained with dirt, nails cracked and bloody. One night, she found herself standing in the backyard, barefoot, clutching a tiny, rusted shovel. She dreamed of soil, of digging. One morning, she awoke to find a new doll on the shelf. Not the porcelain one, but a new one. Made of cloth and stitched roughly. It had her hair, her eyes, her mouth. It looked like her. And the whispering changed. "You're next." 7. The buried truth. Emily finally found it, beneath the floorboards of the attic. There was a small child-sized coffin. Inside, the porcelain doll lay beside a tiny skeleton. Its mouth had been sewn shut with gold wire. When she tried to burn the coffin, the fire wouldn't catch. The air turned cold, her breath fogging in the summer heat. The doll's eye cracked further, and then it moved, without anyone touching it. Its tiny hand reached up and grasped Emily's wrist. She screamed, yanked herself away, and fell back, her head cracking against the wall. Darkness. 8. Becoming the doll. She awoke in a hospital, the smell of antiseptic sharp in her nostrils. A nurse hovered. "You're lucky." A neighbor reported screaming. "We found you unconscious." Emily blinked, trying to make sense of it. The house. The doll. "You were holding this," the nurse added, placing something on the bedside table. It was the cloth doll, the one that looked like her. Emily tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't move. She tried to sit up. Her limbs wouldn't respond. Terror bloomed in her chest. The nurse didn't notice. She adjusted Emily's IV and walked out. In the reflection of the mirror, Emily saw herself. But she wasn't blinking. She wasn't breathing. She was still. Porcelain. Cracked. Inside her mind, she screamed. The doll had taken her body. She was now the one behind the glass eyes. Trapped. 9. The next owner. The house was sold quickly, as part of the estate liquidation. A young couple bought it. They were told the rumors, of course, but they didn't believe in such things. The house was beautiful, full of potential. Their daughter, Lily, found the porcelain doll in a locked chest in the attic. Her eyes lit up. "Can I keep her?" she asked. The parents hesitated. The doll was a bit old and creepy, but Lily was insistent. "She told me her name is Emily," Lily said. "She's lonely." They laughed. Kids and their imagination. That night the lights flickered. Lily whispered to the doll before bed, "Don't worry, I'll never leave you in the dark." Downstairs, her mother checked on the baby monitor. The feed went static. Then a whisper came through. "Thank you." And the doll smiled.